So we thought we are going to discuss two films today. We're going to show the trailer very quickly so that everybody refreshes the memory and has the images in mind, and then we go into the discussion.
Sure.
Thank you all for coming.
Will you dim the light?
Thank you, Madam President. Shall we proceed?
We believe in God. We fear from God because we could end up in hell. And nuclear weapons give us the same kind of fear. Why do we even fear from nuclear weapons? Why do we have nuclear weapons? We don't need to have them.
Nuclear weapons have become an instrument between men of trying to show how long the rockets are and of showing who has the bigger button.
If we compare nuclear abolition to, for example, the abolition of slavery, that started a massive war.
How do we stay in a position of authority and global geopolitical power if we remove all of our nuclear weapons and we are no longer a superpower with freestanding in the free world?
The idea that power is weapons, power is hypermasculinity, power is being militaristic, I think that's a very gendered construction.
Who is it that wants nuclear weapon? And who is it that is threatening us? Is this somebody somewhere from a different planet?
You try the second one?
The second as well.
जब हम पहली चील घर लाए, मैं देर रात जागकर उसे घूरता था। खूंखार रेप्टाइल लगती थी किसी और प्लेनेट से।
मैंने अपनी पूरी लाइफ इसको डिवोट कर दिया है।
मैं चश्मा ले गई मेरा।
क्या है इसको?
उंगली क्यों दिखा रही है मुझे तू? मेरे ऊपर एहसान कर रही है क्या? सोचा अगर हम अंदर जाके लेटेंगे तो चीलें हमें भी खाएंगी क्या? जाके लेट के देख ले।
जिंदगी खुद एक तरह की रिश्तेदारी है। हम सब हवा की बिरादरी हैं। जो चीजें सांस लेती हैं उनमें कोई फर्क नहीं दिखना चाहिए।
Okay, hello, welcome everybody to the first session today at the AVFF Film Festival, the 8th edition 2024. We're very excited to do this in person after COVID, like everybody was struggling. And today we have a hybrid format where two representatives, filmmakers from the films we showed yesterday are present. We saw the film 2 Minutes to Midnight. That was the first trailer which we saw, and we saw it yesterday evening. And All That Breathes, the second trailer. I think it was pretty clear that there was really kind of excitement. I could sense it in the audience about the film. All That Breathes, the movie was packed. Not one seat was left. In the outside screening situation, we also had a wonderful, powerful screening of 2 Minutes to Midnight. I'm very happy that Yael Bartana is joining us today. And we just heard recently that you have been selected to represent Germany in Venice, which is a wonderful news. And even more so, I appreciate that you take the time today to talk with us, because I'm sure you must be very busy at the moment. So maybe we start with your film. I really enjoyed the experimental character of the film, especially the different elements of reality which were there, right? It was a theater performance, it was filmed, it was a one-channel installation as an art installation. There were actors, there were real scientists from the real world talking about real problems in a setting that was fictional, imaginary, yet terribly real. I was wondering if you would mind commenting on that a little bit.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I wish I could be there in person, maybe one day. Yeah, I mean, this is a project that begins actually in 2016. So we're talking about some years of really pondering around this question of what if women rule the world, and if there is a way to actually answer it, or more to reflect on it, and how this is of course, how it is kind of undermining the patriarchal world we're living. And it is such a big question that it's, I mean, people have many different, answers and assumptions. And, that was quite interesting somehow to only stay with the question, what if women rule the world? And actually, in fact, I began thinking about it, and just creating the first action was to make a neon work and present it in different contexts, different exhibitions, and see how this triggers a reaction. I began thinking about my background is I was born and raised in Israel, and I left more than 20 years ago to live in Europe. But of course, I for many years been really thinking about Israel and the politics and Israel-Palestinian conflict and the relation to Europe. So I mean, within this context, I actually thought of the question: what if women rule the world in Palestine, in Israel? This is how the question began, and then I extended it to the world. And then thinking how to even reflect on this question, I started to do it actually in a context of theater, because I was invited to a theater to do a theater play in Manchester. And that was a very good opportunity to start experimenting with this question. And I have been, before this project, I've been doing a lot of other projects that created a platform for discourse, for inviting people to discuss political topics and finding different voices. And so for this specific project, I decided to involve the actors and non-actors to mix reality and fiction. So this is how somehow it started, and that's why it ended up in the theater, because the invitation was in the context of a theater festival. But for me as a visual artist who actually mostly work with video and cinema and kind of trying to find my voice within this, I'm not a filmmaker in that sense of telling a classic narrative, but I use it as a tool to actually create images. And one of the things was in the context of the film festival, the theater festival, I wanted to also use the opportunity to make a film, so that's then you end up with a lot of, then they have a very, very experimental platform, and that is taken from theater, taken from cinema, taken from politics, from role playing, and trying with all this complex medias to really reflect on this topic of what if women rule the world. And for me, the direct, really busy with the situation of nuclear weapons and arms and disarmament, and that story of the Cold War, and also taking Dr. Strangelove as a basic, visual element. Of course, it's directly kind of resonance, historical moment, but also looking how it's affecting the politics today. I hope that makes sense, what I just said. So there's basically a lot of many elements that I try to involve in this in the creation of the artwork. So three locations of the project. It happens in Manchester, in Denmark, and in Germany, in Berlin. And all this I collected material from the three theater plays. And for each theater plays, we work with the local non-actors. So they have an ensemble of about 40 international artists that are actually part of that you actually saw in the 2 Minutes to Midnight.
So, Bartana, the people like in theater, usually we have script. So all your people involved in that play, were they having a script beforehand, or it was a very spontaneous conversation? Because it seems very authentic when they are talking. It's so, if you put some light on that.
Yeah, so for the theater play, we actually wrote a script for the actors, and then so I mean, we're looking at this project. I mean, you have to say that first of all, there was many people involved in the making of this project. It's not one person. It's such a complex project to produce. So many people, had researchers helping me also to find the women who can contribute to the discussions and to the play. So there was a scripted part that had to do with the nuclear, like it's like about two countries that actually having an agreement about disarmament, and one country breaks the agreement. That was the basic premise of this project, and then within this there was a script, but in the script there was enough room to create improvisation. And what we did is we worked with a cast of 5 actors who actually created the main, the government, so the fictional government, and and a government that having a dilemma and then inviting the real experts from the real world to join the table and bring their knowledge and their expertise to the problem, to the dilemma. One of the vice president of the project, the woman in the red suit, she's actually a journalist, and her activity, she's Israeli a journalist that her main activity was actually working with the women for peace in the Middle East. She has a lot of knowledge about the subject and feminism and war so she had to study all the experts that we invited and learn their activities and be able to actually ask them questions. And we also created a pool of questions for the actors that they had to improvise when would be the right moment to ask a question from one of the experts. And we use theatrical tricks, sort of, with the telephone rings and the text, like the tweets, as a way to shift the discussion from nuclear arms to toxic masculinity and gender questions. So this is how we navigated each evening, to shift the conversations. And actually, what you see, the 2 minutes to midnight, is actually complete fiction in that sense, because the dialogues didn't really happen. So because I collected all the material from all the nights, so you have like at the end like 8 different nights with 40 different experts. And then I created like a seamless conversation that never really happened.
So you had served army for a very early age, like at the age of 18 to 20, you were part of the Israeli military. Is that experience of that 2 years has impact on this film? Like from there, the idea germinated, or
of course, born and raised in a country that is in a constant war affects one's own thinking and the potential. The real question of really what happens if women will do is it really going to be different? And we do have some experience from the past that not always it's true, but for me it was really thinking what will happen if there will be a complete paradigm shift, if women will be able to make a paradigm shift, and then that will change the political because I do believe women have very different priorities, and we know that in case of war and conflicts, women suffer the most, so. I mean, the thing is, it is such a complex question, and then and of course, I mean, if you do such a project in a conflict zone, I mean, my first idea was actually to take this project and do it in Israel and Palestine, but it's impossible to do it. It's because of the political condition. It's very important. It's very difficult to do such projects. And I always felt like if we take such a fictional situation, when we go to a conflict zone like that is currently in conflict, and the situation, the energy, and the discussion will be very different and much more charged. Because if you do it in a country that is at peace now, like Denmark, or it's a different condition. So it's very much about diplomacy and like simulation, and it's a different emotional reaction to war situation. And when people are under threat, it's different, than.
It must be terrible at the moment, and my thoughts are with all the suffering which is going on currently in that conflict. I think it's one more reason to really remind ourselves about the beauty of life and all that breathes. I'm trying to include Aman Mann in the conversation, who did this wonderful documentary. Then we can come back to a more general discussion, free to everyone, the very poetic film which we saw yesterday, about two brothers who take care of the birds in Delhi, was such a loving homage to life, which was really mesmerizing. And yet there were so many subtleties which I probably, as somebody who is only since a year in India, missed. So I'm very, very curious about those comments. Aman, would you like to share some thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to the festival, and thank you all for being here. So the idea for the film, if I go back to the beginning, so it was a bit of an unusual project for all of us because none of us is really like a wildlife expert or had like an ornithological view on the city. And it was just like, so Shaunak had been doing a fellowship, our director Shaunak Sen had been doing a fellowship in Cambridge in 2018. And it was at the Human Geography Department, and it was looking at the interaction between humans and the more than human elements of a city. And that just gave him like that gave him a great interest when he arrived back in Delhi in terms of just looking around at human and non-human interactions. And one day he was just sitting at a traffic light, and it's November, December, it's incredibly polluted, and the sky is very hazy, and he could see these tiny dots just circling in the air, and then it almost seemed like one was starting to fall off out of the sky. So he spoke to us. A lot of the team on the film had worked together on his previous film as well, and that image basically inspired the idea of the film, that we would look at these interactions, and the specific nature of that looking came down to the black kite, because as we started researching about wildlife in the city, we came to realize that the number of black kites in Delhi in terms of density is higher than anywhere else in the world, and it's also an incredible level of density. You would not normally expect to have these many raptors concentrated into such small areas. And then we just started thinking about, okay, what happens to these birds if they get injured or fall ill? And we came to realize that they all just went to this one bird hospital in Delhi, which is the one run by the brothers. And when we went to visit them, the whole place was just so incredibly cinematic, because you can imagine walking into their basement. There's like a few inches of water on the floor. The walls are peeling. It's full of these big metal cutting machines for their day job, which is to uh, construct soap dispensers. And you also have, in this small room off to the side, one of these magisterial birds is lying flat on the table, and one of the birds is just bandaging them up. And after that, we went to the roof, which is where the cage is. And even that, just walking in for the first time in this makeshift cage with 60, 70, 80 raptors. And it's like being in the midst of this maelstrom of wings and claws. So we were really fascinated by the space. And after speaking to the brothers, we also realized that what was very interesting is that they spoke about their work with no sentiment. Now, even though they work on this for like 12, 14 hours a day for no financial reward, uh, they were very matter of fact about their work. And we thought that would also just be really great to explore, that you have these people doing this really wonderful thing, but without really looking for anything, with without any sanctimony or yeah.
Yet you
So
ended up.
that's yes. So you're saying?
So was it just so you found this beautiful story about the birds in Delhi and the two brothers who were taking care of it, and yet you ended up with an extraordinary poetical film about really consciousness, about life, about connectivity, about adoption of animals in the urban environment, of the role of the human being in the technical urban environment, and the contrast, and you managed to have this wonderful impulse almost on the conditions of one aspect of life, right?
Yes. We basically, through the story of the brothers and their relationship with the black kite, thought that we could tell a story through this very particular uh, tiny, from this very tiny seed, this it still contained the potential that we could touch on a lot of different aspects on human non-human relations, on the city's metabolism, on the country's sociopolitics, and uh, yet tell it through this lens of this very, very intimate and personal story, because um, we also feel that that allows us, rather than being, very didactic in terms of what to express through a film, here by just positing the contrast between the brothers' work and their acts of very small tenderness, we could create like this kind of contrast between what was going on in their home and some of the greater tensions at play in the city outside. And when it comes to, you were speaking about the poetic aspect of the film. When it came to the film, we decided that we wanted a style. Now, we're not really going to be really shooting the kind of National Geographic or Discovery Channel style, which is very focused in on the bird and on its detail. We don't really have the desire or the competence for that style. And we also didn't want to do uh, like this kind of a panicky handheld style of documentary, because what we realized in spending time with the brothers is that their lives are very cyclical. And so every day, for instance, they will feed the birds, they will treat the birds, they will clean the cage. Once a month, they will mince meat to feed the birds. So every process keeps on happening, very with a clear rhythm. And we decided that we would mm, adopt this camera style that would very gradually reveal these things. And this was also a style that worked when we started, going out in the city and showing the overlaps, uh, all the instances where, you know, you're around a garbage dump in the city and you will see a turtle walking through it. Or for instance, the opening shot with the rats, that on a busy city intersection, you have uh, these burrows and hundreds of rats are running across. And so we adopted this very kind of a language style of through camera movement, through focus shifts, and through different techniques of revealing something about the city. And I think that is what translates to what people feel is poetic about the film.
Thank you, thank you. I would like to open up the floor to everyone. We are here in Oroville. Oroville is not just a place on the world, it's a place where we pay attention to consciousness and human unity. That's the title of the film festival. We chose the films which we show is because we think they reflect different elements of human unity. Being it war, being it connectivity of life, being it poetry, or any of those. So, are there any urgent burning questions from the audience for the filmmakers? Yes, please.
Hi, Aman. So my question, like, it draw my attention that movie starts with that both brothers have that religious belief that kite, a black kite has in their lives. So is that caring and everything started with that, and then it, you know, amplify with the empathy and the compassion towards that? Like, it was an organic process, or they decided that when they started doing this work?
So I think part of the early inspiration came from this childhood memory, which inaugurated a fascination and a love for the black kite. So the instance that you're talking about of as children just going up on a rooftop and tossing meat in the air, and the whole idea that that garners religious credit. But I think the fascination also goes a bit beyond that, and it's not just. I think a lot of it in terms of the desire to look after and protect also came from their mother. Because in terms of what she ingrained, at one point they're talking about her and her, what she ingrained in them in terms of talking about this kind of interconnectedness and having this kind of gentle empathy towards all living things. I think that has gotten very deeply inscribed in them. And so they started doing this at one point when they were teenagers. Then they found an injured black kite and tried to take it to a hospital. But the thing is, most bird hospitals in Delhi don't treat black kites because they're run by Jain organizations. And because they're run by Jain organizations, because of their religious beliefs, they're not able to feed black kites meat. So it's realizing that uh, the brothers essentially realized that nobody was looking after these birds or birds of prey. And then they self-taught themselves this process because just I think the pain of having to go and keep that kite back where it was something that also really triggered this desire that, nobody else is doing it. We have to do something. And the thing is, they're entirely self-taught. Bit by bit, they learn these different processes of how to take care of them. And now they have this kind of a very symbiotic relationship with the other bird hospitals because people will come and drop pigeons off to their hospital, and Salik will take the non-meating, the vegetarian birds to the other hospitals and bring the kites back here. So that is, I think, where it started for them and continues to it just continues through. You can tell that, particularly when you see South, uh, the second brother, when you see him at work, you can tell that it brings him a sort of peace. And in a way that it necessarily doesn't bring to the eldest brother because he's also involved to a much greater extent in the bureaucratic processes of that organization. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
My second question is like for filmmaking decisions, like violence was happening at simultaneous time, and it was very, very, I think, for any filmmaker to include that, happening in the film it can be another dimension to the film, but you have very subtly brought that side in. Just he's watching the video on the phone and saying that I have other work, how can I be participate in the violence so how that strategic you have taken that decision to not to include that at all and focus on only on the guides.
So yes, this was of course a very turbulent time in Delhi's history between the protests that were going on and the violence that broke out. And the thing is, so the brothers they are political beings. Their awareness of what is going on in the world is very high. But particularly for South, it's almost like that's in a way uh, also tempered by his own sense of personal politics, which is a bit different, which is about, the non-human human interface and a larger sort of an ecological consciousness. So the way we decided to treat the political aspect in the film, I think partly was because we decided to be faithful to what is authentic to the brothers. And at the end of the day, they are not going to be the sloganeering type who will be going out for protests on a daily basis. And uh, if at that point we try to bring in um, that whole aspect, more visually and took it a little bit away, then it also changes the form of the film significantly. Um, and the film becomes very different. It's like a complete shift of perspective. All of a sudden, it's a much more sociological film. Mm.
Uh,
But sorry, you're saying?
I want to expand on that a little bit because we are living in such a troubled time. We are media oversaturated. We are bombarded with images of violence. The violence that is happening is terrible, but not just that. We have environmental challenges. We have global warming. You all know that list. I don't need to repeat it. We are facing these extraordinary crises, and I'm wondering, in the medium of film, there's a possibility to address it in a different way, in a more meaningful way, to give us inspiration, to give us hope, to sensitize us, to show us what is actually going on in a more direct way, in a more emotional way, in a more conscious way. It can be powerful in so many more ways. And I think the two films which we saw yesterday and which you're representing today are really they open such a vast spectrum of that, right? We have this Yael Bartana's film, a film which is really going right into the heart of power. Like, who decides what and how can that be changed? And you're reminding us of the importance to be attentive, right? And I'm wondering, is that something which is that exclusive? Is that complementary? Is there what are your thoughts in terms of when you look out the window and as filmmakers and want to participate in this discussion?
Yeah, so that was also coming to like the second part of the reason why we ended up treating things the way we did. It's because when there are acts of violence outside, this style that, apart from being authentic to the brothers' experience, we also wanted to portray it in this kind of a more subtle style and to portray the violence in a way that, we were not being exploitative in terms of utilizing obviously horrible imagery. So we've been very sparing with the images of violence that we have used. And there's also a broader question about how does one talk about this in a way that can hopefully be persuasive, because the thing is, if we went, more didactic with talking about, or more pointed about the specific instances of the violence, the motivation behind it, and the targets of it, you can very easily end up in a way where the people who agree with you will continue to agree with you, but the people who don't agree with you will immediately just reject it out of hand. And because if you're just being very direct in talking about these things, then you can end up with a film that just because of that choice uh, could actually be less effective. Whereas here, by trying to be,
Have you shot that violence, this, and then later decided not to include that?
yes.
Yeah, that was.
So that ended up being like a very conscious call on the edit, because on the when the violence was going out, so you'll notice we have a sit down interview, which is one of only like two sit down interviews in the film, with one of the brothers talking about the what's happening at that point when they're keeping vigil at night and looking after their neighborhood. And that's one of the few instances where the film's form breaks, and that's because what's happening at that moment is so urgent. But we didn't want to stretch that sequence out more. We thought it would just be more effective for the film overall if we were able to make this very strong uh, counterpoint between the larger tensions in the city and compare and contrast it with these acts of kindness that these brothers very, very quietly do every day.
I just keep asking if nobody else has questions.
Should I stand up?
Yeah.
Hello, Ms. Bartana, thank you so much for sharing this beautiful film. So I had a question that, sorry, which camera am I speaking with? This one. Okay, I had a question about the last few months, because this issue came up. I think the conflict really showed that the New World conflicts, if we can put it like that, they're not necessarily on the level of leaders that, let's say, a missile malfunctions and then there's some sort of misunderstanding about who started, but it seems to be very much on the level of population. In other words, about beliefs, about religion, and trying to connect that to the issue of female leadership. Do you feel that women have something to say within a context where it's not only the leaders asking for war, but it seems to be very much the populations that are involved in hating the other side? Do you feel that women on the opposite sides can still connect in a conflict like that, and that they still have something to say to one another? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I mean, there are women who are very, very active on both sides and in promoting peace for many, many years. But unfortunately, they're not being heard enough. And I mean, the tragedy that happens, of course, October 7th, that we have the horrible ongoing situation in Gaza, and I mean, I don't want to go too much into this political, but one of very, very important activists was killed in this occasion, who promoted and really that was her main ideas, and she had contact with the Gazan women, and so a lot of, so there was in the first few weeks, that was part of the real shock that so many peace activists who are living in this region actually were killed. So, I mean, there is a very long coalition between feminist activists on both sides who are really trying to promote the peace process. So but apparently it's not enough, and unfortunately it's the voice is not being heard, and that's one of the tragedies of the region. Yeah.
when voice is not being heard, that reminds me of this, this. I read a little bit on your website the article by Julie Carson. She's I know her from back then. I used her text in my classes. She goes very deep into other works of yours, but I think it applies a little bit in the sense of really going into the textuality and what is it that when people are talking, what is text, what is our consciousness and our subconsciousness, and if we go into deeper theories of psychoanalysis and so forth, where is the reality? How far can we get to reality? If we're talking about media images, we're talking about language, theater play, we're talking about a structured medium to tell a story. All that is in our language of signs, symbols, language in the way. And the real, that's Lacan's question always, right? What's the real? Where does it come? And sometimes it shows itself in ruptures, when things are not working anymore, when they're not properly, how to kind of pull away this wheel. And I think that art has a great capacity to help us to show these things which are beyond the common, right? Be it through poetry, be it through disturbance, be it through irritation or amplification, exaggeration, beautification, and so forth. I can't go the entire list of aesthetic theories here, but I was really fascinated by your film, Yael Bartana, 2 Minutes to Midnight, because just the setup by itself goes through all these layers, right? So you have a theater building, people are coming to see a play which is filmed, it's scripted, real people are there, real problems. There are some jokes and cynicism remarks, which I think most people decoded immediately. And there's also some shining through of that real. And so how can we get to this moment of what does it mean to be in the world? What does it mean to really understand our world in a way which goes beyond all that media fancy and frenzy, disguise and Maya and all those things? Was there a question or comment to that? Yes.
She wanted to ask questions. Yeah, okay. My question is to Aman. And so it's about the making of the film. I just heard that it took longer time, few years to complete this movie, and you had to initially you had shot and you had to again reshoot and all of that. And somehow naturally what happened, the violence and everything, that to me personally had a really grounded impact on the whole narrative. For instance, it really grounded the movie in reality and in a very subtle sense. But that was a very powerful addition to me, because I saw play of even power in there very positively when the brothers, I think it was South, who kept saying that what we do is just a small part of what is being done or what can be done, and that was very powerful. That landed very powerfully. And then these kind of situations add up to the challenges, and it makes it even more powerful, the things that they are doing. While like on the other hand, when I watched 2 Minutes to Midnight, there is discussion about what and how the power can be defined, and who gave the definition, and how are we just going by what is power and everything. So somehow I feel that element really helped. Somehow that was a very good highlight of that movie. And in the years of making, did you have to reshoot something based on that particular event, or it just came in the flow of your final making of the movie? I was just curious about that.
So I think a lot of the things that we reshot were more to do with, instances where we're defining and establishing the world of the brothers. Because initially when we were shooting, we were handheld. So say for instance, if you're in the room where they're performing their treatments, then you're literally just standing in there with a handheld camera and following their action. And then later on, as we looked at that footage, we decided to not use it and to switch style quite significantly so in that case, to show the context of that room versus the bigger room next to it, and how a different kind of a life was going on, because you have these two workers outside, and sometimes they would be working on something, sometimes they wouldn't be there. And in an instances in which we use in the film, they're talking about wrestling. So what we got into was this rhythm of just shooting these specific actions that the brothers did, um, with sometimes with some more uh, specialized equipment. So in that case, we just put the camera on a slider and just keep going back and forth and not really worry if a character left the frame, because eventually, given the space, they would come back. And so a lot of it goes to do with establishing aspects like that. When it comes to moments that are immediate and urgent, at that point, you'll notice that the style changes. Like, say, for instance, when they're having the dinner, when they're talking about uh, the legislation that's being passed and the concerns around the CA and NRC, then that is there, the camera is just present. Those are moments which you only get as they're happening. Or because they're literally just that immediate. So those are things that you can never actually reshoot or get back again in the same way, because as that information breaks, or as it's all to do with that moment, or the moment where his glasses go, because those are just those moments that you really know as a documentary filmmaker, that because of your relationship with the characters and because you're there, you've been privileged to capture in the moment. But apart from that, a lot of the places where we were reshooting, for instance, was when it came to showing the animal life around the city. Because there we would, so for instance, the opening rat shot, we were there for about 4 days and just tweaking whatever equipment we had. Before that, we'd scouted that place with uh, our earlier crew, and then we came back once we had uh, better funding and equipment, and to try and just get that one shot as well as we could. So yeah, that's where a lot of the reshooting came from.
I have an observation. Because we see you, Yael and Aman, and it is two aspects of the present world. Yael, in this film, we are in a room without window. And in this room without window, there are the ruler of the world. And in this case, woman. And in your film, Aman, we are outside. We are in the city with a mix between human being, woman, man, children, lot of wild animals. I count maybe 15, not only cats, but a lot of other animals. And it's a life. And the ruler are in the room without window. So I have only one question for a lot of questions, but I will only focus on Yael. In your movie, sometimes we hear at the back the public of the laughing in some part of your movie. There are the ruler around the table, and sometimes the public is laughing or reacting. My question was, what is the meaning? What was the meaning to leave this hearing of people laughing behind the stage? Because my assumption is power is a theater, but I leave you to answer.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, it was a theater play, and I wanted to keep the feeling that this is actually something that happens live. So it's a different, it's a combination of a play, of a cinema, of acting, of script, of non-actors who have their spontaneous reaction. It's all a mix and finding the balance between all the elements. That's why, I mean, I was not allowed to film the audience, therefore you hardly have any audience addition, faces. But I would, if I was allowed, I would also include that. So you see actually that actually reactions, and so, I mean, it's a somehow in a way it's a film that doesn't really know what it wants to be, but I feel like it's with a lot of consciousness, I've been doing it. So it's a real life and a fiction that melt into this one channel. And I mean, it helps to, when you hear people laughing, maybe it makes you also feel comfortable to laugh,
Are there any other questions from the audience?
So, Aman, I live in Delhi, and whenever this dense pollution months comes, I hear this conversation amongst friends and the family and relatives, like, the children are not able to cope it, and elder people are not able to, so they are shifting from Delhi, moving out, going to the other, cities like Dehradun and other places there. I never heard this conversation that what is happening to these creatures, those are non-voice, they cannot say anything about, and your film has given a very stark reality, like it's not about only the human beings, it's happening to on living creatures. And my point here is like, we so conveniently forget about them, and it's all about we human beings, like how we are dealing with that and what we can shift to other places, we can move to other places, but where this black kite will go, they will be around the landfills, which is like mountains and mountains in Delhi, and the calculation was amazing that how many tons they eat, and if they will not there, what will happen to those landfills. So what kind of reaction, like it's are you doing some kind like by your team and everybody, is there an environmental advocacy or some kind of some kind of reaction from the audience, or you are just like okay with your film, you have done your job, and so is there any kind of, you are taking these films to the institutions and where this kind of dialogues can take place? This is very, very important for your film. Like I also like you have shot more than 300 hours, and to bring out to the 90 minutes film must be a huge task. So all that is really amazing, like what we felt after watching film.
Maybe Aman, you can give us a short answer because we are running out of
time. Yeah. So when it comes to the impact of the film, so we are trying to show it as widely as we can, both among the general public and also among more targeted areas, wildlife organizations, and so on and so forth, because the financial precarity that our characters face has been clear throughout the film, and now, at least thankfully, because of the awareness from the film, they've gotten some degree of funding, so they are more secure for the next few years. And apart from that, in terms of what the longer term effects could be when it comes to Delhi's pollution or waste, I think it's what will actually really be required is so much beyond the capacity of any film. Because you're absolutely right. Like we have a panic for about 3 months every year without fail, and then it just dissipates as the weather changes. I mean, the air is still not good, but if it's, 200 instead of 400, people are like, it's such a clean day. So uh, I don't have a lot of hopes in terms of what any film can really do to mitigate that. But yeah, and as for the edit, yeah, that was a real challenge, and we had to find instruction principle. And thankfully, with our wonderful editor, Charlotte, who's also from Denmark, she found this principle for the film that even as the narrative unfolded, but she tried to find this rhythm which combined, which juxtaposed the claustrophobia of the basement and the brother's house with the wide expanses of the city to create this rhythm that of expansion and contraction that almost felt like breathing. And yeah, when we saw it, then it seemed to have its own effect, and it was yeah, we were really thankful to be able to work with her.
Well, thank you very much. I think we need to slowly wrap it up. Of course, I'm very curious, Yael Bartana, what are you going to do in Venice? Everybody wants to know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I cannot share any news about that. You will have to come to Venice to see my project.
Gladly. Okay, I want to thank everybody for participating in this discussion. It was very nice hearing your insights to the film and the questions from the audience. And I'm looking forward to a very exciting week of documentary film in Oroville. And I wish you all the best for Venice, and Aman, good luck for your next projects. I'm sure you have a huge lineup there.
Thank you so much, and good luck, and enjoy the festival.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.